Hello and welcome to this Blackwell online podcast. My name is George Miller, and my guest today is Tristram Stuart, author of Waste, Uncovering the Global Food Scandal. Tristram has travelled all over the world, from supermarket bins and landfill sites to waste processing plants and pigsties, to try to gauge the extent of the problem of food waste, which, as you're about to hear, is much more extensive than many of us realise. I began by asking Tristram to tell me about a carrot packing plant, which he writes about in his book, which brought home to me just how much food is needlessly wasted in this country.
Well, it was a revelation for me too, visiting the carrot packer of a farmer who was producing carrots for Asda. I can remember walking in, it was a bright, cold December day, traipsing through the mud into his packing yard where he puts all the carrots into plastic bags to go straight off to the supermarket. And I saw a big chest full of these carrots that had just come out of the washing house. They'd been topped and tailed, and they were being piled up in this box. Bright orange, beautiful carrots. So I picked a couple up, took a bite out of one, and it was a really good carrot, better than any I'd grown myself. And I said, "So these must be your top-end supermarket carrots?" He said, "No. Those are all going for animal feed. They're the rejects. We're not going to be able to sell them for human consumption." I said, "Why on earth not? What's wrong with them?" And he said they have a very slight bend in them, and Asda insists that their carrots are dead straight. You have to get the peeler from one end to the other without any obstructions. So I tried to look unfazed, and in we went into his packing yard, and there was two enormous machines. Really fascinating piece of technology, all the carrots whizzing through at one end on a conveyor belt. Inside the machine is a camera, and it looks at the carrots and it tests them against its sort of platonic ideal of carrotness, what an ideal carrot has to look like in terms of colour, shape and the rest of it. If a carrot doesn't meet those criteria, as it jumps over a chasm, a jet of air is fired at this carrot, and the reject carrot will be blasted down onto a second conveyor belt and whisked out of the packing house. And that's just the first in several chains of grading and ultimately rejection of perfectly good carrots. And each of those carrots took up a piece of soil, and ultimately I found that about 25% on average of this carrot farmer's crop was being either wasted outright, being fed to livestock instead of being fed to people, or simply ploughed back into the ground before they were even harvested every single year. And if you expand that from him to all the other farms producing fruit and vegetable in this country and all the others, the waste of land, water, agrochemicals, human labour, time and effort, and ultimately greenhouse gas emissions is almost incalculable. It looks like between 25 and 40% of British fruit and vegetables get cast out of the food chain just at that very initial stage in production, and that's not including the waste that happens further down the supply chain with the manufacturers, the retailers, and ultimately with us.
You say almost incalculable, and it's clear from the book that it is a very difficult calculation to make, just how much food is wasted in this country and around the world in any given period. Why is it so difficult to get a fix on how much we waste?
It depends who you want to blame for it. You could say that it's the government's fault that we don't know enough about this. There should have been, by now, thorough investigations with statistically relevant survey samples to estimate exactly how much is being wasted and what the causes are. Because with the causes of that waste come the solutions. It's very obvious that one of the main ones is to tackle this idea that fruit and vegetables have to be cosmetically, well, I won't even say perfect, because there's nothing wrong with the other ones, but cosmetically fit into these standards that are put by the supermarkets. So the first thing is lack of research. We need a lot more research. And then we need to move from the research into policies that will bring about change. It's up to us, the consumers, to convince the supermarkets that we don't want our land to be ploughed needlessly to produce food that ultimately gets wasted. We want to see all of those carrots, whether they're bendy, potatoes with eyes in them, strawberries that aren't the same shape as each other, all of them on the shelves. We want to have access to them. At the moment, they're kept from us. But the supermarkets are very secretive. about the food that they waste themselves and the food that they cause the suppliers to waste. That's the suppliers in terms of the farmers and the manufacturers. They won't tell us. They keep that hidden for understandable reasons. People would be outraged if they really saw the extent of it. And so the next thing we need is transparency. We need the supermarkets to report how much food they waste every year. We need them all to do it on the same set of criteria, and then we can compare different companies, and ultimately there will become then a competition to be the least wasteful one.
Supermarkets' defence is that they're simply giving the consumer what they want. Consumers want things which don't take long to prepare, not knobbly carrots, potatoes that have eyes to be picked out, and consumers like to see nice full shelves. So what do you say to that, that we, the consumers, are the ones who are actually creating this wasteful policy?
Well, it's a very, very interesting question. It's a chicken and egg scenario. Do we want to hold the supermarkets accountable for these wasteful policies, or do we hold the consumer's policy? And really it's a symbiotic relationship. But in answer to the question, are the supermarkets creating this waste, or are they just responding to consumer pressure? I obviously looked into that a great deal, spoke to various people in the industry, spoke to consumers, and it really looks like a lot of it is directly being driven by the supermarkets. So if you look, for example, at the profitability, the business model being projected at the moment by the supermarkets is, in terms of rejected fresh produce, they will say, we can get a higher profit margin on the premium ranges and a lower profit margin on the lower ranges of spuds or carrots or whatever. It therefore makes economic sense, they argue, to limit the amount of lower end, they call it, produce, and maximise the amount of premium stuff. Now, one of the pieces of evidence that they are directly involved in preventing consumers from accessing the lower end stuff is that when a farmer who is, so for example, I visited a potato farmer who was supplying Tesco, and he explained to me that they have to make very sure when they get rid of their reject spuds that they don't get picked up by market traders or anyone else who's going to sell them for human consumption. They actually have to try and prevent that. They have to make sure that at the most it goes for livestock feed. And that implies that there is demand out there. There are consumers who don't care if a potato has an eye in it or a carrot is slightly bent. They're willing buyers, and the farmers would be willing sellers. But the people who are controlling the supply chain, and that is the big retailers, don't want that to end up on the market because it would undermine the profitability of their higher range products. The counter argument, and this was put to me by a member of the Potato Council, is that it could be just as profitable to market the whole crop. It's a different business model from what's being pursued at the moment, but it's not anti-profit. There are people in the industry who really do think we can market this. It's insane to be throwing away a huge percentage of our fresh fruit and vegetables. It's not good for the farmers. It's not good for our land. But also, it could be good for the retailers. We just have to convince them that that's the model we want them to follow from now on.